We know words are powerful. I suspect that you can recall a particular word that was spoken to you and how it made you feel. We know that words can shape our world, but I wonder if we understand how much they shape our world and how much they shape the world around us. In fact, let me give you a few phrases and see if you recall. I have a dream. The only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Be the change you wish to see in the world. Carpe diem. Love your neighbor as yourself. There's certain words that we remember maybe more so than others. And the fact is, words hang around, right? Words, they carry weight. Words, they impact us. I once heard it this way, that numbers explain the world, but words change the world. I remember my sophomore year of college, there was a professor, Dr. Sepko, and I was taking a literature English class that I had to take, right? If you've been there, you know what I'm talking about. So at that time, I was showing up and I was just barely doing the work, if that even qualifies. And she pulled me aside one day and she started challenge me on doing better. And I thought, well, this is interesting. Why in the world? And she said, look at me. She says, one day you're going to stand in front of people and communicate. One day you're going to write books. One day. And when you prepare well now, it allows you to be better prepared then. I believe in you. And funny enough, Dr. Sepko, I changed my major. I ended up going a trajectory of my life changed because of one woman's words that spoke into my life. Words carry weight. In fact, we're surrounded by words, right? We use them all the time. So let me give you a few little interesting things that, I find interesting. But on average, depending on your age in here, we won't ask you to raise hands about age. 30 to 42,000 words, depending on your age. A person-to-person email has 434 words. A promotional email from a brand has between 50 and 330 words. This may surprise you. My whole life I heard women speak more than men. However, when you really get down to the research, men and women speak close to the same word count. And that stands at about 17,000 words a day. We're doing some talking. We read over at least 265 social media posts, emails, and text messages on our phones a day. At least. That's probably on the low end. We hear or read 100,000 words a day. So that is equal to the length of the book, The Hobbit. Hobbit has 96,000 some odd words. So a little bit over that. A movie script has between 9 and 11,000 words, depending on the dialogue. And an average modern-day translation has 782,815 words. I stayed up and counted for you last night. There's a lot of words. We're surrounded by them. But here's a question. What can words do to us? What do words do to you and me? In the 1800s, there's this phrase that started surfacing. I don't even know if you know this phrase dates back to the 1800s. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words can never hurt me. I think when my parents told me that, they meant well. But as I've gotten older, words hurt. In fact, here's an alternative that I found. Sticks and stones can break my bones, but names could scar me forever. Could you please just throw rocks? And the fact is, some of you sitting in this room, you're scarred by the words that were spoken to you. Might have been last week, last year, 40 years ago. Or there's words that gave you life and it redirected your life. So when you think about these words, I want you to think about back to a time in your life when someone said a negative word to you or you found out they were saying a negative word about you. And I have this question for you. How did it feel? Did it impact you in any way? Now, flip side of the same coin, I want you to think about someone who spoke a positive word to you or a positive word about you, how did it feel? How did it impact you? You know what's unfortunate? I suspect that our list of negative words is probably longer than the list of positive words, typically. I mean, their life and death, the Bible teaches, are found in words. Why? This is the question I kept asking myself in prep over the last few weeks. Like, why do words, and here's the reality, words have meaning. They have meaning. And here's the amazing, remarkable, and scary that words can shape identity. So many of us in this room are the way we are because words were spoken to or about us. As a kid, as a teenager, as an adult, as an older adult, words still shape us. And a lot of times it depends on who's saying the words to us that carries more weight. For some, they could say a negative or a positive word, doesn't impact me that much. But you could say a word, negative or positive, and it lands differently. It hurts differently. It gives me an enormous amount of energy because you're different. So imagine if there was a way that we could intentionally listen and thoughtfully speak words that gave hope, that were healing, that could help people, instead of words that created pain and rejection. But like, where in the world do we start? Well, we start where we're at today. So for the next 3 weeks, that's what we're talking about, words that shape our world. And today we'll talk about words that God says to us. You're like, well, of course that's where we would start. Next week, we'll talk about words that we say to ourselves and to others. And we'll finish in the third week with what are words that we say to God, or what could the words be that we say to God. Have you ever asked yourself these questions? Maybe not publicly, but you've asked maybe God this, or you've said this to yourself. God, do you think about me? How often do you think about me? Like, God, what do you think about me? What do you have to say about me? And God, like, what do you have to say to me? I think about two monumental moments in history, and they're very, very far apart. In Genesis, so we're in the Old Testament, the very beginning. In Genesis chapters 1 and 2, we see the power of words because God speaks creation into existence. He forms the skies. He forms animals. He forms humanity. Like, we see like the power of his words. Fast forward into the New Testament at the beginning. So we have these 4 books at the beginning of the New Testament: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. We call the Gospels, right, collectively. But in John writes a very interesting phrase about, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. And he goes on to talk about now Jesus being that Word dwells among us. So Genesis 1 at the very beginning, the power of words speak creation into existence. Fast forward into the New Testament, at the beginning, Jesus, called the Word, shows up. There's something about a word or words. So I asked, what would happen if we could do a mashup between Genesis 1 and 2 and John chapter 1, verse 14? Like, what would a mashup look like? You'll see it on the screen. In Genesis, creation began with God creating life with his words. He was there, and everything else became. This beginning was good, but when creatures reject his words of life, all of creation spirals into death. So the world needs a new beginning. God continues speaking his divine word, and we see that in the person of Jesus. We don't have time this morning, but what's interesting, it's like John was really familiar with Genesis 1 and 2 because they actually both use some of the same exact words. So words must matter. When I think about these two moments, I think about what the power of them, the priority of them, the clarity, what they set up. Genesis 1 and 2, look what it set up. John 1:14, look what it set up. Jesus is on the scene. And so when I think about his words about us, about you, to me, it sets up what's next for us. You can learn a lot about someone when you listen to what they say about other people. You can learn a lot about someone by watching and listening to what they say to someone. You can learn a lot about how they engage and interact with another person. It tells you a lot about them. In fact, that's what I want us to do this morning. I want us to briefly look at 4 stories in the life of Jesus. In every single story, we can wrap it up in one sentence. Some of them I'm going to share with you, and then 2 of them I'm going to show you a video clip that does such a great job portraying the stories. The first story, the woman caught in adultery. In John chapter 8, here you have this story that the religious leaders who are rule followers, hundreds and hundreds of laws, and they are great at following rules, but they're even better at pointing out when you don't follow the rule. In fact, that's what happens. They find a woman literally caught in the act of adultery. There's no denial there. That's not the point of the story. In fact, in the eyes of the religious leaders, it's not even the point of the story. The point of the story is to use her to trap Jesus. That's the point of the story. So they take this woman caught in adultery. They bring her publicly, right, in front of others. And the goal is to trap Jesus. But what's amazing in this story, in one sentence, he changes everything about the accusers, and in one sentence, he changes everything for her. The power of words. This is what Jesus responds to after his accusers. They challenge him, about this lady. They want to trap him using this lady. And Jesus, in one sentence, says this: "Let any one of you who is without sin be" what? "The first to throw a stone at her." Go right ahead. We'll wait. Probably could have been an awkward moment. And soon thereafter, what happens? They disband. In one sentence, in very few words, they disband. And then he turns his attention to her. And in one sentence, he changes everything for her. He says to her, "Neither do I condemn you." They're gone. "I don't condemn you. Go and sin no more." She's not used to that kind of kindness and grace and compassion. After all, she's been pulled out into the public square, used to trap another man. And in one sentence, everybody disbands, and in one sentence, her life changes. The one sentence for me, when I look at this story and I think of what he is communicating, is this: my compassion for you is greater than their judgment toward you. Some of you sitting in this room, you grew up in a heavy, judgmental home. You could never do right. When you did something, it was always judged. It was always compared. It wasn't ever good enough. You grew up, and in your teen years, maybe we feel the challenge of this. As an adult, we feel the challenge of this in the workplace. Feels like there's, this judgment for, we didn't do this right, we didn't do, In the story of Jesus, his words to you and to me demonstrating one of many stories, that my compassion toward you is greater than the judgment toward you. I have great compassion for you. You can tell a lot by someone based on what they say and how they treat another person. Story number 2, the healing of a man with leprosy. Watch this video.
To spoil this beautiful day or anything, huh? Come on.
It's a leopard. Stay back. Cover your mouth. Don't breathe his hair. Don't come any closer.
It's okay, John. It's okay.
Rabbi, you cannot this disease.
Please. Please don't turn away from me.
I won't.
Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean. Only if you want to, I submit to you. My sister, she was a servant at the wedding. She told me what you can do. I know you can heal me if you are willing.
I am willing. Be cleansed.
Thank you. I knew it. I knew it. I knew it. What can I ever do?
Do not say anything to anyone.
You don't seek your own honor?
Please just do me this one thing.
But what tell people?
Go, show yourself to the priest. Let them inspect you and see that you are cleansed. Make the proper offering in the temple as Moses commanded. And go on your way. Who has an extra tunic? Just one of you, just one of you. That's enough. Green is definitely your color. Not too shabby.
Here you have a man who's not allowed to come around anyone. In fact, you don't even breathe the air of someone that has leprosy. In fact, many times with leprosy, it's what did you do that you deserve to have leprosy? And so it's what's interesting about this story, one of the many things, we could sit on this story all day, is that this one man who had leprosy had greater faith than the people who were the closest physically to Jesus. And when everybody else wanted to avoid him, Jesus wanted to engage with him. Jesus touched him. Jesus spoke words to him. And the reaction of those around him, flabbergasted at what Jesus did. So for me, as I think about this story, I think about this one sentence. I invite you closer when others isolate you further. This whole life, his whole life, it's isolate, isolate, isolate. And Jesus said, I invite, I invite, I invite, I am willing. Story number 3. It doesn't get a lot of attention because the story before it gets the attention. How many of you are familiar with the story, the feeding of the 5,000? Yeah, but how many times do we talk about the feeding of the 4,000? The feeding of the 4,000. So they go into the wilderness. There's a group of people, and they've been listening to Jesus teach for about 3 days. And I love how the Bible lays it out in Matthew 15. It talks about Jesus was concerned about their welfare. It's hot. They've been traveling. They've been sitting. They've been listening. And he wants to take care of them. We often hear about feeding of the 5,000, and it's like, wow, 5,000 plus. But the feeding of the 4,000 is like the story that's pretty much right after it. And the people closest to Jesus struggle that Jesus can do a miracle. And it's like, did you not just see what we did with the feeding of the 5,000 plus? And like, we're still on the struggle bus. It's similar to the video that we just watched. Like, they continuously are flabbergasted at what Jesus can do and who he is. So in the feeding of the 4,000, Jesus is concerned about their welfare. So he tells them, let's take the 7 loaves of bread and a few fish, and he multiplies it, and they're fed. In fact, not just fed, but they have 7 baskets left over when it's all said and done. Again, remember feeding of the 5,000? They had extra. Feeding of the 4,000? They have extra. Jesus is consistent. There's a pattern here, and the pattern is this. In a sentence, I care about what concerns you, and I want to exceed your expectations. I love, back to the guy, the leprosy, if you're willing. Like, and Jesus not just met him there, but exceeded. Jesus not only fed the 5,000 plus, he exceeded. Jesus didn't just feed the 4,000, he exceeded. He cares about the things that concern you. The thing that kept you up last night, he cares about that because he cares about you. The thing that maybe nobody else in this room knows or nobody in your family knows that feels like the weight of stone mountains on your back, he sees that too. He cares about you. We hear these phrases over and over and over. But if we would understand and apply the power of his words, it might actually change how we think, speak, and act. He cares about each of us personally, and he wants to exceed our expectations because he knows better. We sang it earlier. You see what I cannot see. He knows better, and that's the exceeding the expectation. I know this and see this much. He knows and he sees all of this and wants to give us better. The 4th story is a common story from the outcast woman at the well, also known as the Samaritan woman. Watch this video.
Would you give me a drink? Did you hear me?
That bad, huh?
What?
You, a Jew, ask for a drink from me, a Samaritan, and a woman.
I'm sorry. I should have said please.
You know, it's not safe for you to be alone out here.
Nor you. Why haven't you come with others? Why so late in the day? Don't women come to the wells in the cool of the morning?
Yeah, well, none of them will be staying with me, so I have to come at noon in the heat, as you have so kindly reminded me.
Why won't they be seen with you?
Long story.
I'd still like a drink of water if you can spare it.
Amazing what a parched throat will do. Aren't I unclean to you? Won't you be defiled by this vessel?
Maybe some of my people say that about your women, but I don't.
Yeah? And what do you say?
I say if you knew who I am, you'd be asking me for a drink.
Really?
And I would give you living water.
Would. Except that you have nothing to draw water with, and this is a deep well. Besides, what do you need from me if you have your own supply of living water?
Long story.
But Jewish water is better than Samaritan water.
That's not what I
Are
said.
you a better man than our ancestor Jacob, who dug this well? Your water is better than his?
I know Jacob. And everyone who drinks this water will thirst again. But whoever drinks the water that I give him will never be thirsty again.
Wouldn't that be nice?
The water I give will become in a person a spring of water welling up to eternal life.
Really?
Yes, really.
Prove it.
First, go and call your husband and come back. I will show you both.
I don't have a husband.
You are right. You've had 5 husbands. And the man you're living with now is not your husband.
Oh, I see. You're a prophet. You're here to preach at me.
No,
Usually the one good thing about coming here alone is I can escape being condemned.
I'm not here to condemn you.
I've made mistakes. Too many. But it's men like you who have made it impossible for me to do anything about it.
How?
Our ancestors worshipped on this mountain. But you Jews insist Jerusalem is the only place for true worship.
They say that because the temple is there.
Exactly where we're not allowed.
I'm here to break those barriers. And the time is coming when neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem will you worship the Father.
So, where am I supposed to go when I need God? I've never received anything from God, but I couldn't thank him even if I did.
Anywhere. God is spirit. And the time is coming and is now here that it won't matter where you worship, but only that you do it in spirit and truth. Heart and mind, that is the kind of worshiper he's looking for. It won't matter where you're from or what you've done. Do you believe what I'm telling you?
Until the Messiah comes and explains everything and sorts this mess out, including me, I don't trust in anyone.
You're wrong when you say that you've never received anything from God. This Messiah you speak of, I am he. The first one was named Ramin. You were a woman of purity who was excited to be married. But he wasn't a good man. He hurt you. And it made you question marriage and even the practice of your faith.
Stop it.
The second was Farzad. On your wedding night, his skin smelled like oranges. And to this day, every time you pass by the oranges in the market, you feel guilty for leaving him. Because he was the only truly godly man you've been with. But you felt unworthy.
Why are you doing this?
I've not revealed myself to the public as the Messiah. You are the first. It would be good if you believed me.
You picked the wrong person.
I came to Samaria just to meet you. Do you think it's an accident that I'm here in the middle of the day?
I am rejected by others.
I know. But not by the Messiah.
And you know these things because you are the Christ. I'm going to tell everyone.
I was counting on it.
Spirit and truth.
Spirit and truth.
It won't be all about mountains or temples.
Soon, just the heart.
You promise.
I promise.
This man told me everything I've done. Oh, he must be the Christ.
Hey, wait! Your water! You forgot your,
Foxy, a man who told me everything I ever did.
Here you have a scene, and I wanted to show it to you because I didn't want to read 42 verses and put you to sleep. So I thought showing it to you would be more helpful and engaging. Here you have a woman who doesn't come in the morning when all of the other women come because she's sick of the eye rolls. She's tired of all the whispering behind her back. It's just easier to come at the hottest moment of the day alone. And here you have Jesus traveling through this town, which, if you know anything about the history, there were other options. But I love when he talks about, like, he was there to meet her. And I love, for what it's worth, that his first public revelation was to her. Not to some ruler, some king, some well-known person, but to a woman at the well who felt like an outcast. That was his first public revelation of himself. You see, in this situation, the words, the sentence, everything changes when you see how I see you. Have you ever looked in the mirror and you thought, man, this outfit makes me look good? Have you ever looked in the mirror and you thought, I just don't like what I see? Or maybe metaphorically, you've looked into a mirror and you're like, I'm just not blank. Or you look at social media and you don't have what that person has. But see, everything changes when you see how he sees you. Words are powerful. In every one of these stories, words were spoken, words were listened to. Words had formed these individuals and their identities, but Jesus changed that with his words. The Bible teaches us that words are life or death. It's about the kingdom or darkness. And your words are equally powerful. So where do we go from here? Well, actually, I think that's where the tension shows up, because this sounds all well and good. The tension is this: will we actually trust his words? Do we believe his intentions? And sometimes what happens is we throw on him our experiences that we've had with other people. And we assume he's the same way. But he's not. So what if we actually trusted what he says? Here's a phrase for you, and this has been a challenge in my own life. We can give more weight to the words of others who are against us more than we give his words showing he is for us. He is for you. He is for me. He is for us. So I guess the question is, like, what would it take for me to actually believe that? I mean, we looked at Genesis 1 and 2. We looked at John 1:14. We looked at all of these stories, like the power of words, the power of the living word, Jesus and John, and what that sets up. And words still stick with us today. In fact, here's what I'd love to do. We'll finish a little differently, no song. But I want us to take a journey back before we were even born. And the power of words even in that moment. So I want to invite you to bow your head and close your eyes. And I want to read 5 verses over us this morning. And then we'll wrap. Probably familiar verses to you. Psalm 139. The power of words. That before you were even sitting in this room in 2024, these words were for you. You made all of the delicate inner parts of my body and knit me together in my mother's womb. Thank you for making me so wonderfully complex. Your workmanship, it's marvelous. I know it well. You watched me as I was being formed in utter seclusion, as I was woven together in the dark of the womb. You saw me before I was born. Every day of my life was recorded in your book. Every moment was laid out before a single day even started. How precious are your thoughts about me, oh God. They cannot even be numbered. I can't even count them. They outnumber the grains of sand. So this week, I want you to look right here. This week, maybe you could say this phrase. You'll see it on the screen. God, you uniquely created me and kindly think about me more than I can imagine. You uniquely created me and kindly think about me more than I can imagine. And see what that does for you this week. It's in the U version and the notes from today if you need to find those. And then finally, maybe this is a prayer that you could pray this week. God, help me to believe your words spoken to me. These are for me. Help me to believe. Heavenly Father, thank you for back in Genesis that you spoke creation into existence. In John 1:14, that Jesus, who was in the beginning and now was in flesh dwelling among us, is here and real. And we see these stories of Jesus' life engaging with people, many who felt like they were outcast, many who had negative words spoken to them, and they encounter this man, this Jesus, and he speaks words that replace those other words, words of life, not words of darkness, and their life changes. You're still in that business today. So help us to think about the weight of your words to us and how those words have meaning and they can shape our identity. Help us to trust your words are for us and not to give more weight to the words people speak against us. Allow us to trust you. Allow us to trust you. Allow us to trust your words and watch how it shapes how we think, how we speak, and how we act, because you are for real for us. In Jesus' name, amen.